So the word is out. 2025 was a lousy year for box office, so far anyway. Not that we have a lot of prospects on the horizon that are likely to do it some justice. And when it comes to summer, we had a under $4 billion performance that I think a lot of people were embarrassed to try to suggest we would actually exceed. 2025, as a matter of fact, marks the first time since 2011, that's right, 14 years, without a $700 million plus comic book movie. And that's just sad. Not only that, it points out the glaring vulnerability of one of the major film studios and their reliance on the billion-dollar price tag each and every time. And of course, I'm talking about Marvel, and of course, that is in reference to Disney. Disney has been their own worst enemy for a long period of time, and of course, last week, as you all know, they recognized they have been, well, hating on the boys, and that's putting it rather mildly. So, without further ado, let's take a look back on a terrible, terrible 2025. Here we go! Now, before we get started, just a real quick reminder, double check you're subscribed to the channel. If not, hit that red subscribe button, turn it to gray, turn on the notifications, all of them, so you don't miss anything, because I do dozens of videos each and every week, live or pre-recorded, and you don't want to miss entertainment and information that will gladly help you along your pop culture journey and be more well-equipped into what I will agree is a war. Now, moving on, nobody's saying that 2025 needed a superhero film, but as far as the earnings, it needed those kinds of earnings. We've been looking at a very depressed box office for a long period of time, and an extended run in the winter headed towards spring, where we were wondering if anything was going to open at over $100 million. Thankfully, with Minecraft and a few others, we got some hits, just not enough of them. And as Minecraft led the way, it had to get support from a live-action remake of Lilo and Stitch. And, of course, some dinosaurs with very little dinosaur in them. And some other things that, well, just really still didn't live up to the hype. In fact, there hasn't been any hype, and that's what this article from Jordan Ruimy goes on to point out. You see, 2025 marks the first time since 2011 without a $700 million plus comic book movie. But you could also add to that without a whole lot of over $700 million movies, because there just wasn't. Between Superman, Fantastic Four, the Thunderbolts, and Captain Anti-America, there was nothing. And there's nothing on the horizon. There was a time when Marvel could do no wrong at the box office. Every release seemed destined for a massive haul. Even the Zack Snyder-led DC Universe managed its share of billion-dollar juggernauts, and then they were gone. The era's gone. In fact, I don't think it's ever coming back. Troubling signs are pointing towards the tide clearly turning. And again, it wasn't that hard to predict that this was happening since, well, everybody in my sphere of the Fellowship was talking about it years ago. This was the coming doom, and how appropriate it's possibly going to end with Doomsday, at least for Marvel. The phrase superhero fatigue has become the default explanation among box office analysts, and that's a funny word because they don't really analyze anything. They take the studio's word for it, including on the actual budget of these things, and don't analyze squat. They leave it to people like me and Odin and many others, including Midnight's Edge, WDW Pro, That Park Place, and more. In fact, the whole G&G team seems to be able to analyze films better than, well, any mainstream tabloid, or should I say trade paper. But the shorthand for lack of audience excitement around the genre is, well, superhero fatigue. It's been repeated endlessly in post-pandemic landscape, and for good reason. Not really. There were still a few movies that were making that near billion-dollar performance. You just didn't let them. Now, that phrase feels more relevant than ever. The streak is broken for the first time in 14 years. Not counting 2020, of course. Where most theaters' obligatory shutdown happened, the comic book movie machine has slowed down in a firm and meaningful way. 2025 is the first year since 2011 in which not a single superhero blockbuster crossed the $700 million global threshold. Captain America, or Captain Anti-America, only earned $415 million, didn't even get close to breaking even. Thunderbolts, $382 million, and maybe twice over, not breaking even. And then Fantastic Four at $473 million, and likely already dead, nowhere close to breaking even. And finally, Superman, $600 million. Well, it came up short as well, and probably is still underwater. So all of them failed to get there. The numbers were startling when put in perspective. For over a decade, Marvel and DC projects practically guaranteed sky-high grosses, even when warning signs emerged in the early 2020s. Titles like Doctor Strange Mom, which was complete garbage, finished at $955 million, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, a less than stellar version of the Guardians of the Galaxy, finished it at $845 million. And it's been suggested that may not have broken it even. Still, they all leapt past the $700 million mark with ease. Not anymore. Whether it's Marvel or DC, the results simply aren't adding up. The long-predicted superhero bubble looks to finally be shrinking. Oh, it burst. Come on, be honest. Crowds that once rushed to every Cape-led event are now far harder to lure, especially on the international side. Yeah, because you hated on all the men. The men are now done spending their hard-earned money in an ever-shrinking economic situation, especially if you're international customer. You're pricing people out of the market, and you're also shaming them or harassing them out of the market, depending upon how you want to look at it. And as Jordan says in the article, of course, the spin machines are working overtime. James Gunn and Warner Brothers have insisted Superman was a major hit, while Disney CEO Bob Iger called Thunderbolts a success just days into its run. However, and that's all laughable, the bottom line remains. None of these films reached the $700 million benchmark, and only, well, one reached $600 million. Superheroes are not selling, or at least these feminized versions of superheroes are not selling, and I think that's the bigger problem. As Jordan tries to look forward and get 196 comments on their article, what happens next is anyone's guess. Well, my guess is that maybe the DC genre of comic book films, the DC specific ones, might have a little resurgence. Whether or not that delivers a lot of eyeballs in future films is questionable, because I'm not sure that Supergirl is going to do very well, especially the way she was introduced in Superman. And I'm not sure that introducing something on a streaming service is a good plan at all, as Disney's found out. As Jordan says, all eyes are about to be on Marvel's very costly Avengers Doomsday and DC's next chapter, the Supergirl movie that I mentioned. The safest bet may be Sony's Spider-Man Brand New Day, but I'm not certain, and I have a couple of reasons to say it that way, and I'll share them with you in another video in, well, the next few hours or the next couple of days. The web-slinger could be facing audience fatigue in a way that we weren't expecting, and with the introduction of more girl boss power. And I'll tell you more on that in another video, as I said before. Ultimately, there just isn't much out there to get excited about, at least not in the future, because Marvel's already gotten rid of the fear of missing out equation because, well, nobody cares anymore. They're not invested in these characters because of the poor writing, and they're not invested in comic books anymore at all. That's a sad story, but it's a true one. And Disney has leaned so far into the messaging that they can't tell the difference between a good story and a bad story. And the problem is, if you strip the message out of anything that Marvel's made recently, you just have a boring movie that nobody's interested in, one with a very convoluted story and a lot of man-bashing, man-hating, whatever you want to call it. But as far as the $700 million mark, I think that's going to be more and more rare, because you've already chased most of the people away from the theaters if you didn't look at last weekend's box office and realize that there were only $77 million total over the course of the weekend. Not only is that something that freaks out the exhibitioners, it also should be freaking out the studio, because whatever they put out, nobody's going to see, and that's scary indeed. Anyway, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. In fact, I really beg you to do so. First of all, it helps the channel substantially. And second of all, it lets me know what you think. Are we going in the right direction as far as the film industry performance goes? Is anything that I said a surprise to anybody? Is the fact that $700 million now the new benchmark for future films? And if so, do you think we'll ever get back to $1 billion? Sure. A few and far between, but on a consistent basis, I think not. But let me know what you think, again, in the comments section down below. As always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya! Hopefully at a good performing movie.